some of the traditional leaders have actually served one purpose or another of, being a glue to society. So you go to it because of how the ANC in KZN is at war with itself. Okay. Between 1 to 2% to mostly 3%. At most, then, if you're saying 15, 16 is a 7% growth.
The State of the Nation team is very excited to announce a partnership with Pace Car Rental. Pace Car Rental is one of the fastest growing car rental businesses in South Africa, with branches all over the country. They've got branches in Sandton, Kempton Park, Pretoria, Mhlanga, Gqeberha. Wherever you are, Pace Car Rental is there as well. A bold podcast like the State of the Nation needs a bold partner, and we have found that partner in Pace Car Rental. So why don't you support them? Well, Dr. Ongama and Mtimka has given us so much to think about with the big political picture in South Africa, using the Eastern Cape as a base to understand what is happening in South Africa. Sometimes we don't get the complete story. We're going to be back with a closer look at Dr. Mtimka's thoughts on the forthcoming election and what we have to look forward to post the general election in 2024.
5%.
Yeah.
That is going to be interesting. That is almost impossible for me.
And the emergence of parties like Action SA, Build One South Africa, Rise, they seem to be energetic. They're well resourced by the looks of things. I've said this before. They seem to have the talent that is lacking in the ANC. One would imagine 20 years ago, these are people that would have been senior, the up and comers in the ANC, but they've chosen to go with their old age policy. But do you see them making an electoral impact?
Absolutely.
Because they're not featuring on any of the polls.
They are going to make impact as far as I'm concerned. And the impact they're going to make is mainly from giving options to a section of the electorate that would have stayed at home and not vote. And by the way, so my sense is that they have been intentional, some of them, about getting that section of society. If you look at the footprint of where they're going as far as mobilizing voters is concerned, it looks to me like these are people who are intentional about organization building and intentional about that you need to make effort to reach potential voters. They don't come from the fact that you look like you've got a good report, which, by the way, was a problem as far as Akang was concerned, in my view. The business world and the employment world operates from a feeling that because you qualify, you deserve it. That's not politics. Politics doesn't give it to the ones who deserve. It gives it to the ones who are intentional about getting the support base. So I think many of them have passed their acid test of getting enough signatures to be able to be on the ballots. And obviously some did not, Jardin's party, for example. But I was surprised by Shiluva. That they also made the threshold. It was quite interesting for me to see.
Yeah, we've spoken to Bongani Baloyi quite a few times on the show. He's obviously an impressive guy. Interesting strategy. I must admit, I nearly choked when he said that part of the cornerstone of his policy is to bring back royalty. Right?
Okay.
Which, as a fierce anti-royalist, right, I did nearly choke. But,
okay.
For a guy who's really effective, modern guy to say, we want some unelected king making decisions, I must admit, it was. I still struggled to get the words out, because you would have thought that I was surprised. Let me just leave it at that.
So I've had an interesting journey in my perceptions about the role of royalty. I think early after university, I wrote an article that condemns, fortunately, I cannot find that article. And I was happy. I
To
was
the
happy
people
that
out there, don't go and look
I
at.
was happy that I couldn't find it online anymore, because I'd wanted to go look at it and correct it. Because look, where I come from, royalty is like dead.
Yes.
In my rural village, I mean, we don't have a royal. Our own property relations and all of those. But I've seen how some of the traditional leaders have actually served one purpose or another of, being a glue to society. If you ask developers who go to the Mthatha area for investments, they can be a pain in the butt sometimes and come up with, requirements that are, where you see that this is self-serving more than community serving. But even with those, I'd say they still play a very important role, especially since in South Africa, we've made the point to royals that, look, your power is not beyond the power of people, the elected people. It's interesting, the developments in KZN recently, where Sponsor Duma is trying to fight for space and put the monarchy in its place, except that there's a backlash on that. But in general, there need not be any fights about how we conduct the lines of authority. In development projects, they tend to trigger conflicts, but that is as much a reality in cities where the royals don't matter as it is in those cities. But yeah, it's quite interesting. I now in my 40s, fortunately, finally got there. I think that there's space for royals, especially in these areas where they become a source of order, they become a source of even some local justice systems. Because remember that the state doesn't reach the entire length and breadth of South Africa in the same depth that it does else in the cities.
I suppose you could, in some sense, say that in South Africa, it fulfills a role that, say, in some countries a church would do. Almost a sort of a social cohesive role of helping the population as this sort of lodestone.
Sure, yes, absolutely,
So Bongani Boloyi, maybe you're onto something. We'll get onto it in a second. So some of these splinter groups that come from, let's call it, from the multi-party charter type of parties, Action SA, you think that there's a good chance they're going to make an impact by drawing in people who aren't being polled. These people who perhaps would not have voted in the past.
Yeah, that group, those parties are going to take some support from the ANC, they're going to take some support from the DA, and then they're going to get supporters that would choose not to vote.
Yes.
Also, I think they're going to take from everybody.
Yeah. Now, I would say that in a way they may have been helped a little bit by the IEC of all people, in the weirdest way. People are quick to point to Agang and Cope and parties like that came along and fizzled out. I see a dramatic difference. These parties have really gone out to build some serious structures.
Yeah.
Party offices and structures, provincial leadership, municipal leadership. These are not ill-prepared. This is not one man and a fax machine. This isn't a guy just dealing on his name.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's really, this is how they could win. Especially, remember, if you are not a direct splinter, you're not going to leverage from an organizational an organizational base of your mother body, of your mother party. So as a matter of necessity, you have to build. So COPE is different in the sense that because it was a split nationally, it leveraged some of the organizational structures of the ANC. The ANC, coming back from exile, leveraged the organizational structures of the UDF. It had to build from it. So that's the first part of the test. Can you build an organization? Whether or not you last depends on whether you can manage transitions.
Yes.
Whether you can manage democratization.
That's exactly
Internal democracy.
Yeah.
Because it's easy when you appoint people from national to local to control. The DA, for the most part, actually, it's for me, I think that its serious conferences have been in the 2010s. Its most serious or let me say, its most consequential congresses, when there was a real prospect of two factions vying for control of the party. But even there, I mean, negotiated outcomes were still evident, in my view. The problem starts when you can no longer negotiate the outcomes.
Yeah. Now, South Africa is splintering all over the show because one of the next party for us to discuss is the IFP. And why I say splintering is that the IFP, to my mind, had this talk about a leader who wouldn't go. He still won't go and he's dead, and that's Buthelezi. To my mind, was kind of holding them back, and they seem to have, a good opportunity, and we've seen that in by-elections. Do you think, obviously, that was a lot of this happened prior to the emergence of Mkhonto Wesizwe? What do you think the prospects are for the IFP?
What's interesting for me about the IFP is that obviously it was on a recovery path from the death of a splinter party. So it was where the ANC was after COPE died.
Right.
Now, interestingly, the succession politics should now be triggering an organization that is unstable. But it's interesting for me that it seems like those are contained as far as the impact of succession politics on the sustainability or stability of the organization. It seems to me that this is contained, that you're still relating with the IFP as a coherent organization than you do with a factionalized organization. I'm sure it is in many ways, but it's not gotten to a stage where the factions are bigger than the party itself. And perhaps this may have to do with the fact that opportunities for leadership are only going to be a reality probably in this leading up to the next conference of the party, where some perceiving the right to lead, the opportunity to lead the party, can start that campaigning that can be detrimental. But I think that the party will still have some leeway as far as creating negotiated leadership in ways that help it to at least delay the consequences of internal factions that are detrimental to the organization. So I would say for now it's going to survive. The next conference may trigger some issues, but that will be beyond this next election.
And do you see them doing relatively well in the election?
I think that this is quite interesting because they've been a comeback child since 2016. They consolidated that trend in 2019. I don't think they will do terribly. There are some people who are saying MK Party is going to significantly reduce their margin. I don't know. I've not looked at the drivers to say in reality this is what's going to happen. If anything, I think that the IFP, might have some people from the ANC who go to it because of how the ANC in KZN is at war with itself.
Okay. And you mentioned MK. I don't think we really know what the party stands for. Do you? It seems to be a mystery to me. Other than Jacob Zuma, I can't see it.
It stands for an anti-Ramaphosa reality.
Yeah, and that's not really a policy. That's more of a spat, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that the former President Jacob Zuma appeals to people who feel excluded, wants to appeal to people who feel excluded by the South African economy, and wants to lure those people into thinking that he's the one who can deliver who can deliver more results. And I saw some allegations about the mafia and all of those things, the construction mafia. I don't know how true those are, but if it was true, I would understand why. It's people who would be feeling that they need some political vehicle for them to be able to push the aspirations of breaking down an exclusive white / elite BE economy so that they can actually have space for themselves. I think this is what he wants. It's the same constituency that the EFF wants to appeal to in different ways.
Now let's talk about the EFF, because obviously the EFF, certainly for this election, seem to be really focusing on growing in the KZN area. They did their conference at Moses Mabhida. They've been very visible there. They were for a time coalition partners with IFP, walked away from that quite aggressively, and since then have done quite poorly in by-elections in KZN. But nationally, they still dominate the headlines. Every poll puts them at significantly higher than what they polled the last time. Do you think they will grow?
Yeah, I think the net effect of this election will be a growth for the EFF, marginal growth, probably 1-2%. If they do exceptionally well, they may settle at about 15-16% of the vote.
So that's up 6%, because the last election they got 10.
And then I think in the local, because remember, I factor in local government elections.
So do I.
Grew to about
in actual fact, can I correct you there, because I've had this on the show before. In 2019 they got 10.9%.
Oh yeah.
And 2021 they got 10.3%.
Wow.
Right, and it's
I'll
you can check that as much as you like. Right, because I actually had that discussion with Wayne Sussman, who looks at by-elections. But anyway, so that was their base. People assume that they got higher support, but you still see them going up.
Two things for me. So if you look at the EFF is popular among young people. This was from the first scientific articles written about them. This was very clear. I remember, I think Stembete was among the first to write about them, to show, taking a deep dive in Joburg and wards to see, wow, it's interesting that our research, myself and Gary Prevost, showed that in the KwaZulu as well as elsewhere, the support that was coming to the ANC to the EFF was exclusively from the ANC, and it was young people. If you look at social media, again, it shows every day that the EFF is popular there as a party. Now, obviously, there's always a migration path, if you like, that the support base that's online or in universities takes time before it can actually manifest in reality, in the real world, as it were. So I think that there will be some significant youth base that vote for the EFF that sees it grow by between, as I said initially, between 1% to 2% to mostly 3%. At most, then, I mean, if you're saying 15-16 is a 7% growth, That's interesting.
5-6%.
Yeah, but my initial position is that, as I argued, it was a 1 to 3% margin.
Okay, so then the big question becomes, if we put this all together, and I know this is a puzzle that's very hard to think, sometimes we think we're missing a few pieces, or we've got a few pieces too many. If the ANC declines, right, largely because they've been pretty useless at everything they've done. People are tired of having no power, the chaotic way they've run what they've run. It's going to call for a significant coalition partner. I mean, obviously, if they get 50% plus one, they'll act as if they got 70%. They're not going to change, right? If they get 48%, they'll get a couple of entrepreneurial parties. These are the one-man bands, Bantu Alamisa, Patricia de Lille, all these people that are in it for the money. They'll join the ANC as they always...
Who is not in it for the money in our parliament?
Yeah, that's also true.
Yeah.
But at least some people will do their job while they're in it. I mean, we've seen what we've seen. So, but that's not the case. They're not going to get by with a little coalition of these entrepreneurial parties. They're going to need a significant partner.
So I wouldn't call them entrepreneurial parties. I'd call them non-threatening parties to the core message or the core policy offering of the ANC. Part of the reason why the ANC would be wanting them, it's because unlike the EFF and the DA, they are unlikely to lobby to change the essence of what I think is a sound policy mix from the ANC.
Okay. Who do you think, if they need a bigger partner? There's been a lot of discussion in this sense. What's your feeling if the ANC needs a bigger partner? Where do they go?
Yeah. It's neither here nor there as far as I'm concerned. First of all, it will take a lot for them to consider a bigger partner.
But if they've got no option? I mean, if they do get 42%, they're not going to get by with the what you quite diplomatically put as non-aligned party. And I'm saying, what's the point to Bantu Alamisa, who always votes for the ANC? So, he's their biggest agent.
So if we say they get 42%, I'm now taking out my,
yes.
Okay, well, let me count like we do,
yes.
Counting a scorecard. So if they have 42%, take the EFF has got how many?
Call it 15. Let's call it 15.
15, yeah. Okay. So that 15 of the EFF takes us to 57.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the DA has got, let's say it's got 22.
20, let's say.
Okay. Let's say 22 for argument's sake. 3% lower than the 25 they think. So from 57 to 99, will it? No, it wouldn't be 89.
Yeah.
79.
Right.
Okay. Can you see how big that margin is from 79 to 100?
Yes.
Now, my argument is that it will take a lot for the ANC to leave that 21% that is non-threatening as far as its offering is concerned to go to the DA or to the EFF. So to me, I think it's a moot point.
So they're going to be able to cobble together a coalition of all of the smaller non-threatening parties, and it won't be business as usual, will it? It'll be business unusual, because there is a definite difference between having the majority in your own party. You go to Parliament, you want a bill passed.
As far as the work of lobbyists and everybody else is concerned, I think it's not going to be business as usual. As far as government programs are concerned, it's going to be business as usual.
Might be better.
Because I can't think of any of those parties that are going to say to the ANC, if you don't pass this law, we're not going to be with you. I can't think of any of them as in terms of what they want. Put the DA there, put the EFF there, definitely. They're going to want to say, if it's the EFF, they're going to say, let's now work on the expropriation bill. If it's the DA, they're going to say, let's scrap BE and affirmative action. It's going to be a tug of war. That's that. I don't think the ANC is going to want to get into that position.
Okay, so I want to leave you with exactly one last question. We're sitting in a pretty miserable 2024.
Oh, by the way, spanner in the works.
Spanner, right.
Spanner in the works.
Yes.
I was holding provincial dynamics constant
Yes.
in that discussion. Now remember, when you factor in provincial dynamics, this is where now the bargaining position of the DA and the AFF becomes stronger. Because KZN, Gauteng are big budget provinces. So so this is a rational actor ANC minus other dynamics. If Panyaza Lesufi sees that my realistic chance of getting of the premiership again is either with the EFF and the DA, and also Siboniso Duma in KZN has that same thing. They can push national government to reconsider its position. Now, I think about it, I don't think that it would be so significant as to completely sway the approach of the ANC to national coalitions, but it problematizes my own thought process as far as what I think the ANC will be prepared to do as far as national coalition is concerned.
So then you sit around a big table, the big calculator, and you say, we do this coalition, but then I get Joburg, you get Gauteng, I get Western Cape, you get KZN, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this, and you literally...
You think Western Cape is going to be a...
Western Cape, coalition? I think, is in play. I really do think that the DA is under...
I guess in the
some pressure of
255 or...
Yeah, well, they got 54 in the last election.
Yeah.
And, they've only had the emergence of opposition. They haven't had anything that's gone in their favor, if I could put it that way.
Makes sense.
So, to lose 5%, I don't think is going to be that hard to do under the circumstances.
I think it might just still edge it. I think, but it's interesting.
It's going to be very interesting. Okay, but like I was saying, I want to leave you with exactly one question, and that is that, in your opinion, as we sit here on the eve of elections in 2024, we know that we can only speculate as to what's going to happen. We have to wait for polling day. Do you think, with all of the permutations that are going around in your brain, that South Africa will be a better place after the election compared to what it is now?
Whether it becomes a better place
for its citizens, i.e. you and me and everybody watching us.
Whether it becomes a better place is not a function of what politicians do.
I think it is.
It's a function of, you see, here's a problem in South Africa. You've got people who devote themselves to building organizations, building businesses, building non-profits, improving their personal lives, right? And wholeheartedly they are devoted to do that. Then you have people who are also doing that and occasionally say things that potentially can upset the order, right? Or threaten to upset the order. And those who do that get given a lot more airtime, get given a lot more, recognition sometimes than the people who are actually out there building a country. I'm so excited about the interviews that I've been doing for my book, Pathways to Inclusion. I remember last time it was still a concept, where I speak to people who say, one farmer, for example, in Sunday's River Valley says, look, I realize that there's no way we cannot transform if we want South Africa to succeed. So what did I do? I took some of my best managers. We went and I bought farms. And I said, these are my farms, I bought them. And I'm a shareholder. But you have a right to make it a success and buy me out. And this guy was not busy with the gambit because he says, I knew they were going to do it because these were my trusted farm and succeeding farm managers. And he says to me, Broer, I kid you not, 70% of them have already bought me out, right? This is somebody who leverages his capital because he's a serious guy. I mean, he's got a big capital. So he says, you know, when there's toys here and people burn farms, my farms don't get burned. The reason why nobody will touch my farms is because how we do things as a family is more humane, is more inclusive, is more just. Now, this guy has gone and identified a BEE instrument done in the 90s by, I forgot who the minister was, to allocate a tiny fraction of water rights to black farmers. Government spends time and never leverages this for development. He gets approached by a guy who was doing investment promotion in the agricultural sector, a black guy. He was doing investment promotion in the agricultural sector to attract foreign investors to invest in these projects that he's developing. And this guy says, you know what? The one thing apartheid government, one of the things they did exceptionally well is to take water and bring it where farmers are. There is infrastructure. And one government minister knew to keep at least 10% of those water rights allocated for black farmers, except that it's not been realized. So you and I are going to work together, and we're going to leverage this, and we're going to build a black farmer base where I am investing. The only thing I don't want is I don't want community squabbles. So I'm going to work with private investors who are black. And they've gone and they've done these things. So this is interesting, it's succeeding. Then I meet other people who are saying, we are part of this big retailer supplier development program. We've been there, we've done some things that we burnt our fingers on because of payment structures and all of those things. We've done so. Now we have recovered from those things and things are working better. Then I go and I speak to other people who have done mass share schemes, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, you know, we give politicians too much credits at time. South Africans are doing amazing things out there, and before we know it, what they are doing is going to show in the measurements, you know, because that's another thing, that the mundane, to build businesses is mundane, to build organizations is mundane, and very often it doesn't show immediately in our national measurement instruments. So we take what is measurable at a given time and create a picture of this is the future of, this is what South Africa is like. I don't know if you've been to Bizana, or maybe Wild Coast.
Yeah.
Now, Bizana is an interesting town for me. It has grown in terms of businesses that are operating in that town. And if you look at buildings, residential buildings that people have made, it's interesting. So rural areas are telling a story of, wow, there are some ways in which life has changed significantly. People are building lovely roads, build houses next to the road. How many units have been built? We don't count because it's not showing in property rates. There is not property now. It's now on the EFF issue. It's us now who are remaining stuck in property rates regimes that make rural municipalities to be poor when they have lots of privately owned houses, even if they are owned. I mean, back home they would say that land is not titled, right? It's not titled. But there's no questions about who owns that the property that my father owns. And the only issue is transferability. So we could be saying, why don't you introduce different property tax regimes in rural areas so that you can properly account for developments that are taking place there and allow people to leverage, the properties if they become titled. And Anyway, I've said a lot of things. The point I was trying to say was that South Africa is not a sum of its politics.
Ongama, thank you as always. A lot to digest there. A positive view of where South Africa is going. We'd like to thank everybody that's joined us for this part today. I'd like to thank Pace Car Rental, who sponsored us today. You saw their ad earlier. And please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you the next time on the State of the Nation. Thank you.